just passed the threshold of urbanization in the world of 50%. By 2030, we expect that 60% of the human population will live in urban centers. As we all know, and it's already going on since more than a century, urban living entails great social, technological, scientific innovation and opportunities, also great economic opportunities for urban dwellers, but it also comes with social inequities and inequalities. And this panel is trying to focus on the social dimensions of urbanization right now and future urbanization in the coming decades. So we would like to focus on 3 issues, and I would like to invite all the panelists, His Excellency Ambassador Lüner, to focus on these expected outcomes. We would like to share best practices and urbanization policies that create inclusive, accessible, and resilient communities and ensure that no one is left behind. This is the motto of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. 2, we want to understand how social and technological innovation can positively impact cities and address the challenges faced by vulnerable groups such as families, youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, and indigenous peoples. And 3, we would like to encourage stakeholders to commit to build inclusive, accessible, and resilient cities. And I hope we will have the opportunity to amply address all of these issues and come up with very practical solutions. So now first, I would like to introduce a video from the director of the Division for Social Policy and Development. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us, but we will watch a short 3-minute video of her.
To achieve social dimensions of the Agenda 2030, focusing in 2017 on SDG 1, which is to end poverty. New themes and new sustainable development goals will be identified for the 2018 series. Now, the discussions today will inform policymakers on the priority theme for the Commission for Social Development in 2018, and that's going to be its policy cycle. And the theme chosen is strategies to eradicate poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. And it will also fit into the ECOSOC theme of 2018, which is from global to local, supporting sustainable and resilient societies in urban and rural communities, as well as to the next high-level political forums, which focuses on transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies. The first discussion today, Accessible Cities United, will explore how future cities can be smart, prevent urban poverty, and promote inclusion and well-being. Then on December the 1st, we will focus on building future societies for all with the 2 panels. One, exploring urban inclusion and building socially integrated and resilient societies for all. And another, examining sustainable tourism, promoting inclusive social development and prosperity. During the Commission for Social Development, from the 28th of January to the 8th of February next year, 2018, we shall then explore the urban and rural dimensions with experts discussing on the important role of farmers, the farmers of the future. Follow us in our portal, UNSDN.org. I look forward to your participation in this series and wish you all fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you all. I would like to first to thank the United Nations Division for Social Policy and Development for organizing this event as part of the series, as we have just heard, and it's really a very timely initiative focused on the implementation of SDG Goal 11, but in the wider context of course, also the new urban agenda, have been focusing our attention on urbanization, on the cities agenda, and making sure truly that no one is left behind, also in the cities context. So congratulations on that initiative. It is both timely and I'm sure it will be very useful. And as a country, as Slovakia, but also personally, I have been really very happy to be able to join you this morning, and we certainly will stay engaged throughout the series to focus on these issues. In my prior career, I was privileged to serve as ambassador in Nairobi, Kenya, and you know that the headquarters of the agency that is primarily focused on urbanization and cities agenda, UN Habitat, is in Nairobi. I was chairing the Committee of Permanent Representatives to UN Habitat in 2014 and 2015, and then until May of this year, I also served as President of the Governing Council of UN Habitat. So this is my primary exposure and involvement with this particular agenda, and of course in that context I couldn't resist the temptation of coming, joining and supporting this initiative. So let me focus on a few issues that I wanted to highlight. First of all, really it's a great occasion to be here on World Cities Day, and congratulations to you all, and happy World Cities Day. It is really timely that we can talk a little bit about the important global challenge as urbanization and sustainable urban development certainly are. The general theme, better city, better life, and the specific sub-theme, innovative governance, open cities, certainly highlight the crucial role of urbanization as a source of global development and social inclusion. In this setting, I don't need to share with you or really, as they say, preach to the converted or cite any statistics, but just one piece of statistics probably would be useful anyway. Whereas in 2014, the global urban population reached around 54%. It is projected to rise to 70% by 2050. So this is yet another clear indication of the fact that our attention to sustainable cities and to sustainable urbanization is not a trendy issue, is not something which we have chosen because we like looking at these issues, but this is something that really is very pertinent and which requires our further attention, because there are a lot of other issues related to it. If we speak of cities, of course, we have to mind the environmental dimension. We have to mind lots of other dimensions connected with it, whether we speak of energy or we speak of housing, waste, education, health, and many other issues. Previously, in other occasions, I already mentioned several times that I see Goal 11 to a certain extent as an overarching goal, because whether you look at education or health or water or energy, this is all something which is critically relevant for us in the urban context in particular, and so it's great not only to be happy about having Goal 11, but I think it's really critical that together we are able to really focus on tangible ways how to improve the implementation of Goal 11 as an overarching framework for looking at far greater issues and far greater aspects of our work. What I also would like to emphasize is the importance of strategic and innovative approaches, and in that context, I'm very happy to see that among our panelists and among you in the audience, we have people that are keen on innovations. Whether we speak of urban design, planning, management, and governance, and the accompanying trends in ICT in particular really play a key role for us to be able to deliver better on implementation of both the new urban agenda and the sustainable development goals. The term smart cities may seem to be relatively new. Probably if we had mentioned it 20 years ago, not many would register it. Personally, I think I would be probably in the same category, and this is something that requires our further attention. But it really is something that we really see as a critical item, and I see the particular linkage between smart cities and innovations, whether we speak about traffic or we speak about transportation, or we speak about issues such as urban parks, promotion of biodiversity, or we speak about connectivity and smart solutions in that context. So I would like to highlight that the smart city concept, I believe, provides, I would call it a golden opportunity for us to use technology, to use innovations, to enhance economic development, sustainability, and quality of life. Smart cities, smart cities concept is really a key opportunity for us to be able to focus on economic growth, but also to really incorporate the concept into planning, into design, into evaluation and monitoring, and through this to ensure that cities are not only sustainable, but they are also accessible for all. Let me briefly mention the situation in my own country, in Slovakia. We have recently worked very hard on transforming both the new urban agenda and the 2030 agenda into practical policy issues, both on the government level and on the regional and local level. Just one small example that I can mention, we have also involved the Slovak Innovation and Energy Agency into urban design and urban planning, in the sense of making sure that the innovators, the designers, the planners, but also the business community are well linked and are well connected with the current trends. And there is also an important European initiative which I wanted to highlight. It is the Accessible City Award, which aims at promoting accessibility for people with disabilities in 4 particular areas: built environment, public spaces, transport and related infrastructures, but also information and communication and public facilities and services. I think this is a very positive example of how we can galvanize further support to the importance of smart cities and accessibility in cities, and hopefully this can be something which will further inspire also other actors. Let me conclude on two items, or with two particular areas that I also wanted to highlight. First, partnerships. Partnerships really are a critical component of our work. Of course, we quite often speak about partnerships in the implementation of the 2030 agenda and in general in sustainable development, but I think in the urban context, partnerships are even more important than in other areas, because without involving the local governments, local administrations, without involving the regional entities, of course, depending on which structure they have in individual countries, but more importantly, without also involving the business community, the innovators, the youth, and other key stakeholders, we cannot really expect for very viable results in relation to the sustainable urban development. We really should invest further efforts into making sure that also events like that or other initiatives that we can promote within the UN context contribute to sharing of lessons learned, to learning from each other, to highlighting the best practices, and making sure that we promote partnerships. In the context of the ongoing reforms of the UN development system, partnerships is also a critical component, and we will see quite soon that with the new areas of focus for how we would like the UN development system as such to be able to better deliver on the implementation of the 2030 agenda, it will not happen without appropriate partnerships. Lastly, I thought that I should quote William Shakespeare. I used to be an English teacher in my prior life, and I'm very proud of those roots. Shakespeare once said, "What is a city? What is a city but the people?" And of course, we cannot lose sight of the people in our cities, because it is really in the end for them that our strategies and our policies need to be delivering. You may have noticed that the president of the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly and at the same time my Minister of Foreign and European Affairs, Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, has chosen the topic of his presidency focusing on people in strive for sustainable development and living on a sustainable planet. This is key because it is the people that need to be the beneficiaries. Often, of course, we focus primarily and rightly so on the most vulnerable and the poor. But without the involvement of populations and the people of the cities, we cannot really ensure that our strategies are implemented. And people are the greatest source of the wealth that this planet has. So we better develop the prospects that people of our cities have, And we better make sure that especially the youth, which represents the future, is engaged and that they are given appropriate opportunities. I would like to conclude with inviting you to stay engaged and joining forces and making sure that we can provide to the people, especially to the youth, the tools that would be useful for them, and that would ensure that they contribute in their everyday lives to making our cities not only sustainable, viable, economically prosperous, healthy, and clean. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your opening remarks. It was very, I think, enlightening for all of us to hear how you highlighted the complexities of urbanization and how they interact with the smart cities concept and can obviously hopefully address these issues, especially accessibility and other important issues that could come in when we talk about environment, energy, housing, water issues, health, education, and obviously all crucial importance for cities of today, but also for highlighting the importance of partnerships between government, the private sector, and other stakeholders you pointed out in hopefully implementing such a smart cities agenda for the cities of the future. Now I would like to turn to our keynote speaker, Dr. Eugenie Birch, who is the Nussdorf Professor of Urban Research at the University of Pennsylvania and a Fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Dr. Birch, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Greetings, colleagues. As the Ambassador has asserted, we are urban, period. This is not an option, it's a necessity that we recognize this. We also wish to be sustainable, and we have pledged to be sustainable in a series of incredible global agreements in the past 2 years. The Sendai Framework, the Addis Ababa Action Agreement, the Agenda 2030, the Paris Agreement, and the New Urban Agenda. Since it's World Cities Day, I think we should take a look at Agenda 2030 and its sister, the New Urban Agenda. And I think we should take a look at what it means to be smart. The title of our meeting today, Enabling Future Cities to be Smart. On one hand, one can consider all the technological ways we can do that. On the other hand, we can look at how we measure being smart. And there is an acronym, SMART, which stands for taking on activities that are specific, that are measurable, that are accessible, that are replicable, and that are timely. SMART. And this is what I want to talk about today, what the frame is for being smart. My colleagues will give you some very practical examples on innovation and technology, but I want to frame this. We know we have Goal 11, which Ambassadors reminded us of, and its 7 targets that deal with housing, transportation, planning, environment, disaster reduction, protection of culture and environmental heritage, green and open space. We know that there are at least 23 other SDGs that have an urban focus, and so we can't forget those as we pay attention to Goal 11. We know that we have a UN Convention on persons with disabilities, and that too gives us guidance in terms of how we can make the world a better place, not only for vulnerable people, not only for persons with disabilities, but for all of us. And that means paying attention, according to the convention, to the buildings, the roads, the transportation, indoor and outdoor facilities. It also means paying attention to information and communications and other services, again, where technology and innovation are going to play a part. We have heard many people talk about having people-focused policies versus place-focused policies. I would argue that this is a false dichotomy. And again, as the Ambassador reminded us, we cannot have people policies in a container that doesn't work. So place is intimately related to people. We cannot forget we must do these things together. Think about the place, think about the overarching importance of making our cities livable for the people who live in them. So we need to translate all of these high-level global agreements into action. And right now, UN Habitat is working on such a framework. It has a funny name. It's called AFINUA. You might wonder what AFINUA means. I think they should think of a better name. I'm looking at Andrew Rudd when I say that. But it's an acronym which means an action framework for the implementation of the new urban agenda. Now, what is the new urban agenda? I just told you what the SDGs were and some of the important things of that. The new urban agenda is a roadmap. It's a roadmap for achieving the SDGs. And it's a roadmap that's very, very simple. It has 6 items. The first 3 items are about the kinds of commitments that we have all pledged to make, and we have to remind ourselves that we're going to make these commitments. And those are those of promoting social inclusion and eradicating poverty, promoting prosperity and opportunities for all, and making sure that we do sustainable and resilient development, the 3 legs of sustainable development. But how do we translate that into actions? We translate that, according to the new urban agenda, into making sure that we have an appropriate urban governance structure. Secondly, we have to plan and manage our spatial urban development. And lastly, we have to engage in the means of implementation. This is knowledge sharing, it's financing, it's capacity building. It's simple. It's a recipe. It's simple. 6 things. And you only need to think about the last 3, quite frankly. We know what we committed to the first 3. Those are, in our DNA. But these next 3 are really very basic and very simple, and they construct the container, the cities in which we are going to include our people, everyone. And first and foremost, we need to be thinking about how we would detail these things. In these 3 areas, urban governance, planning and management, spatial development, and means of implementation, let's see what this means. So in urban governance, think about it. We need to have a frame at the national, regional, and local level that enables those 3 commitments that we were talking about. So that means you can't go to Nairobi, to the UN Habitat offices, I'm sorry to pick on them, and be someone who might be in a wheelchair and try to get in the building and go through that building. How many of you have been to Nairobi and UN Habitat? So tell me what the problem is.
From
You walk in the building,
Yeah.
then what happens?
Yeah, you have to go down and
You
you mean in the building or
Yeah, in the building itself.
Yeah, it's like a big maze, I would say.
It's a maze, but it's a destructive maze. You can't get to the meeting rooms
And also, I would say
because of the stairs,
Yeah.
right? You have to parachute it in if you're not able to, right? So we have to start with our own first, right? And making sure that places are accessible. And it's not going to happen by volunteer efforts. If we have even a UN agency that does not, I'm sorry to pick on Habitat, a UN agency that is not forced by the country in which it exists. Of course, the UN doesn't have to deal with the national legislation, but that's another aspect. But you need national legislation that says you must make universal design a legal item. What is universal design? Universal design is making places and products to be aesthetic and usable to the greatest extent possible to everyone, regardless of their age, their ability, or status in life. So we need to push universal design through our urban governance levels, at all levels. We need the legislation then that applies to building codes, to streets, etc. Planning and management of spatial development. What do we mean by that? We need to think about the urban plan and what it contains. We need to think about the use and intensity of use of land. How are we using it? Where is it? What's the connectivity of streets to our housing? We need to make sure that we allow everyone to use things as they can. I asked a couple of friends to give me an example. I'm going to call them in now. When we talk about urban spatial planning and design. Ted, Give me an example. What's good universal design? Ted's an architect.
All right. I think, first of all, we clearly are more than halfway through getting where we want to be from where we were a decade ago or 2 decades ago.
Oh, come on, now just give us an example, quickly. I only have 10 minutes. I have 2 minutes left.
Okay. I believe that parks that are have equity for older people, for people with disabilities, and accessibility is one level of universal design. We've done office buildings in developing countries, even like Russia in 1993, where the first office building we designed with universal design, full accessibility, was rented at more than double the rent because there were no other places for international companies that require their staff to, if they visit, in this case Moscow, that they could get into the building and use all the facilities.
So it's a good thing. Okay, Kathy, quickly.
Very quickly, being put on the spot here. There are a couple of examples. One, to follow up on what Ted said, New York City with Commissioner of Parks Mitchell Silver, who was a student of Jeannie, so he learned well, has initiated a pilot project last May to enable 8 parks within the 5 boroughs of New York City to be part of Parks Without Borders. And Ted and I are meeting with them on Friday to see how we can integrate the achievements we made in the new urban agenda to their project.
Super, Parks Without Borders. All right, so 2 practical examples from universal design. We need to also think, then it is Apanua, about the urban economy and municipal finance. How are we budgeting to make sure that this happens, and how are we raising local revenues to make sure that we can pay for the ideals that we have with universal design? And local implementation is also part of what we need to be thinking about. What kind of participatory activities are we having as we think about enabling cities to be smart? We need the voices of many stakeholders. I would give the example of the General Assembly of Partners, which we created for the New Urban Agenda, which took and represented 16 different groups. So when we talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships, the normal conversation is, oh yes, we need to bring together government, all 3 levels, yeah, we agree with that. We need to bring together business, yeah, we agree with that. We need to bring together civil society. Civil society, that's not one big lump. Civil society is a collection of voices that need to be heard in their interests, that we need to put these multi-stakeholder partnerships in arenas where they can discuss their issues, how they're going to enable cities to be smart, understand each other's needs and each other's desires, and come to the compromises that we need. So we need to create in the UN and in these environments in which we're talking about enabling future cities to be smart, partnership arenas where we build trust, communication, and understanding about what it means to be smart. I challenge you to think about how we do that in the future. I don't have a quote at the end from Shakespeare, but I will tell you, tempus fugit. Time is flying. We have to work on this immediately. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Birch, for your inspiring keynote remarks and for pointing out the importance of both the SDGs and the New Urban Agenda for shaping future urbanization that we wish to have, but also for pointing out the importance of the concept of universal design. I myself work with disability issues, obviously know how crucially important that is for persons with disabilities, but also for other social groups that we are serving in our divisions, such as youth, older persons, indigenous peoples, and so on. I would like to move now to our panel discussion. We have 4 panelists who come from different areas. Our first panelist is from the regional government in Italy, and we have 2 people from the private sector, from Accenture as well as Microsoft, and we also have a colleague from UN Habitat. As you all have the short biographies, I will just introduce them very briefly in order to save some time since we started a bit late, and would like to remind them all to hopefully stick to their 6 minutes in the presentations. Now first I want to give the floor to Mr. Roberto Giambetti, who is the president of the Regional Council of Veneto in Italy. He will be speaking in Italy, in Italian, which will be simultaneously translated by his assistant. Please,
Thank you very much, but I think it's better that Mr. Franzina, as an expert, can introduce my speech in English.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, as I have a quote from Shakespeare. He says a game, at the end of the tempest, as you know, Prosperous, after breaking his magic bolt, say, we are made of the same stuff of the dream. And our dream is to create an alliance of inclusive cities and territories. A true alliance. First step. This is the second. Can you change the thing? You know that there are a lot of problems. Urban areas are crucial for social development and economic prosperity. They are cultural and creative centers and drive economic growth and innovation, but also they have a lot of overwhelming problems, not only from an environmental point of view, but also from a social point of view. Think of the banlieue, for example. And also from an urbanistic point of view, banlieue are a sort of ghetto in many towns. At the same time, it's fundamental for us to protect rural areas, to make the development of our cities sustainable. We have to work on two levels: the main towns, the great towns, and the rural areas, the small towns, everywhere in the world. We have to balance. Please, next. The speed and the scale of urbanization bring challenges for all families members, children, parents, youth, persons with disabilities, and older people. These slides show on the left some of the key challenges. City leaders, parliaments everywhere in the world need to build a new modern agenda, and on the right, you're giving issues to take these issues. Please, I'm going. Taking up the invitation of the UN to transform our world for the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, we point to circular economy. This is a tool not only to redefine the productive process, but also spaces and communities, reorganizing cities. This means thinking ways on concentrating an amount of adequate financial resources, transferring it in investments that fund companies carrying out the circular economy, employing women, youth, persons with disabilities, guaranteeing adequate standards of retribution and free time for workers. Is this a dream? Let's point on the immense strength of consumers. We are the consumer, and we can decide. Try to use the consumer as a weapon. The first true resource we don't waste is the time. The time that we steal the feelings. The time never comes back. We can't waste the time. The community welfare model is not exclusively linked to economic elements addressed by policies, but to aspects linked to lifestyles, promoting health and environment that help to live more and better. Taking full advantage of all the resources available in local communities and cities begin with the families. We have heard of person, people. We speak about families. Family is home, the center of social life, the first place for education, where you can learn respect for others, for the environment, use resources, avoid waste. The recognition of the social function of the family is founded on relationships of reciprocity, responsibility, and solidarity between genders and generations. Sustainable cities start and end with cohesive and inclusive families, and the design and the implementation of policies in the context of the 2030 Agenda should be guided by human rights-based approach that supports families in performing their valuable social function while respecting and ensuring the effective realization for the rights of family members. Today, families are faced with the stress from work commitment, the need for care and assistance for elderly and people with disabilities, the disintegration of family units, and economic difficulties. Nonetheless, each individual is unique with a wealth of history, values, and traditions, and therefore a potential resource for the community that participates actively for its improvement. Veneto and its cities consider family as a social force, which is not a passive policy recipient, but a driving force of change, and chose to support the well-being of the family. Veneto has 531 small towns. The greatest towns in Veneto, Venice, which has 300,000 inhabitants. Very small town, but we have smaller town everywhere. And in the small town, you can keep control of the social problems, social and environmental problems, and so on. Please, next. The project. Our project is we wish to promote an alliance of cities all over the world that aim to be inclusive and sustainable families by being responsive to their needs, according to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. This initiative will be developed with the collaboration and commitment of the International Federation for Family Development. Next one. To contribute to the international community's interest in global organization, experts, academics, scholars, mayors, and civil society representatives will meet in Venice at the end of November and reflect on few but concrete questions about our future and the future of the city. Only 3 or 4 questions with concrete answers. Last, to avoid environmental disaster, demographic problems, growing demands for food safety, education, we have in front of us a cultural revolution, reorganizing cities, pointing at the instrument of circular economy and the support of family. The role of the family is crucial for society and to build inclusive cities. They are the first support for the social and economic growth of the person. Families have changed over time. They have become smaller and more fragile. However, as an agent for development and well-being, to leave no one, they are still the first response to the economic crisis and social inclusion. They represent a huge potential for cities to be empowered with adequate environment. Thank you very much indeed for your attention, and I beg your pardon for my terrible English. You know, people tend not to speak a very
Well, thank you very much for this perspective from the region of Veneto in Italy. It's obviously important to also look into regions in countries and not just the national level, the local level, since important policies are being made there. Thank you also for your concept of the circular economy, which I think was interesting for us to hear, and also pointing out the importance of families. In my former career at the UN, I've also worked on family policies once, and I'm very aware how important policies or good family policies can be for children, grown-ups, older persons, and basically address the issues of various social groups through the family. So thank you for that perspective.